I even got some notes prepared for that, Hubert. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Gerardo Poli.
And this, sorry. Okay.
One of the best bits of advice I've ever received was to find good mentors and to learn from them. Trusted people who have already done what you're trying to do now. I've been fortunate throughout my career to have some fantastic mentors to help guide me, but I realized that they'd be hard to find and also hard to commit the time to one. This is why we've gathered some of the best minds from the veterinary world and squeezed them for their wisdom so that you don't have to learn the hard way.
With the help of our guests, we flip the veterinary profession on its back and explore its soft underbelly to find the tips, tools, and inspiration that you'll need to build the career that you've always wanted.
I'm Gerardo Poli.
I'm Hubert Hemstra, and this is the Vet Vault.
Dr. Rob Webster is an emergency and critical care specialist and one of the founding members of Animal Emergency Australia, a group of emergency hospitals in Queensland and Western Australia. He has played a major role in the training and mentoring of large numbers of vets and vet nurses, inspiring them with his boundless energy and infectious enthusiasm.
We pinned him down in his garden in far northern Queensland, as evidenced by the constant background noise of all manner of parrot and lorikeet, to see if we could extract some of that wisdom for our own good and for yours. And he did not disappoint. We covered some valuable ground, such as how he approaches challenges in the face of fear and uncertainty, despite feeling completely overwhelmed. He gives us his views on charting a career path, on whether to specialize or not, and even gives us a few study tips and tells us what he thinks one of the best things is that you can commit your time to, and on why you should always listen to your mother. So please join us in this fascinating conversation with Dr. Rob and be inspired. And I'm going to start with my version of Rob. I met Rob at a congress 2-3 years ago now, Rob. And what strikes you immediately about Rob is just general enthusiasm. I've never met anybody who's more enthusiastic about the veterinary profession and just life in general, and just that infectious enthusiasm when you talk to Rob. And it immediately started telling me a couple of stories and interesting stories. But what I'd like to know, Rob, is your journey to becoming Rob Webster, Rob Webster 2018, moving from young Australian lad to where you are today. Just if you could give us a bit of a rundown of how it all happened.
Yeah, thanks, Hubert. And it's a long story, so I'll try and abridge it. The things that I was lucky enough to find in my career that have really made it fulfilling for me was, first of all, emergency medicine. I walked into that one not really expecting it. I graduated from university just wanting to do a GDV, and from there, I after a couple of years, I'd done a few, and the enthusiasm never wanes for those sorts of big, scary cases and trying to make a real difference to patients that go home. So finding emergency medicine was the first thing. The second thing was being able to develop expertise in that field that I really thrive on. So I was able to work with a group of specialists and then sit membership and eventually fellowship, and being able to understand exactly why I do what I do physiologically has really given me confidence and helped me really feel that I'm learning and making a difference in that field. And finally, business ownership. And I was trying to think why business ownership's been so important for me. And I really think it comes down to the degree of challenge. You never get good at it. Yeah. What something goes well today, tomorrow you go 2 steps backwards, and there's a new challenge that you never expected. And it's an absolute roller coaster, but because of that, you get challenged every single day, every single week. And so you can never become bored and you can never master it. And I think those three things have come together to make my career, personally really fulfilling so far.
I want to jump straight into the physiologically why you do it. Are you happy to share why did you do it?
Yeah. Um, Now that's two levels. What I meant by physiologically why I do it is, I did emergency medicine for several years, and I knew exactly what to do. For GDV surgery, there's a recipe, right? The patient comes in, you resus them, you give them some fluids, put a stomach tube down them. But what I mean by physiologically is when I got into fellowship training and actually studied the physiology of the body systems and went back to those lectures that I was drunk in or sleeping through in university, how the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system works, how cardiac physiology works, how respiratory physiology works, and actually realizing, why I did those interventions. I'm going to give this patient frusemide for its diuretic effect and its bronchodilator effect and all of those sorts of things. And it really helped remove some of the uncertainty and the worry that I was doing either too much or too little for each patient.
Okay.
And so that's, I meant physiologically for the patient more so than myself.
Okay. So psychologically, why did you do vet? Why do you do vet? What motivates you?
Yeah. I got the idea of doing vet. My mum one day pulled out in grade 10, said, look, you can do, there are three things I think you could look at doing at university. One is forestry, one is agricultural science, and one is vet science. And she's like, I don't think you're going to get the marks to get into vet, so I think you should really look at ag. And of course, I'm like, no, stuff you, mum, I'm doing vet. But when I really think it back, it had already, the idea had already formed. I'm sitting at home now in the house I grew up in. I bought it, and it's really important to live here. But I remember seeing my first dog that I'd bonded with, Tig, die of heartworm disease here in the front yard where I'm sitting. And I think it was actually the powerful impression that left on me of a kind of suffering that, when mum presented those three different career options, vet was really the only one I ever thought about.
That's cool.
You mentioned there, or Hubert brought up physiologically, but you sometimes refer to the term the buzz, and when you said physiologically, my instinct first was to actually think of the buzz associated with emergency. Is that something, or is that something you can explain to the listeners what the buzz means for you?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think I understand that's what Hubert was getting at when he asked the question, and it was something. And I think I go back to my experience in fifth year vet science as a student. I was all set to go and be a cow vet. In vet school, doing large animal medicine was always cool. Well, it was at UQ. You had to wear your boots and listen to country music and grinding cows' feet with the angle grinder. That was where it was at. And I had to do, but you had to do this 2 nights in the emergency centre, and it was a little emergency centre in Bowen Hills. And I walked in, I was late. I wasn't really that excited about it. And I met up with a young vet who was a bit of a show off, and his name was Simon Lemin. He was working that night. And we saw a pericardial effusion, a GDV, and a dog with dilated cardiomyopathy. And I remember these cases coming in, needing to do a really important intervention in each of those 3 cases to keep them alive. And the sense of urgency, the big decision making, the risk taking, all those things appealed to me. And I stayed the whole shift, slept through the next day of university classes, and that was it for me. That's when I realized that there was no other career path. And it's something about that I think this is a job for adrenaline junkies, emergency medicine. I see, Gerardo and Hubert, you as well, interviewing me, and you're both people that kind of want to challenge yourselves. And I think that's what the buzz is in emergency medicine, is no matter what the situation, you're always throwing down the gauntlet and trying to rise to the occasion. You're trying to do something difficult every single day, and I think that's what keeps me coming back for more.
That first shift, well, that story you just tell. I mean, that could put a lot of people off it completely as well. It's to some. I must admit, you include me in this group of people who thrive on that. But it took me a long time. I think when I was a new grad, if I had a shift like that, that would have taken me months to recover emotionally from it. Do you think your attraction or ability to cope with that is that an inherent personality trait, or do you have thought processes, or do you have tricks and tips of how to deal with a stressful situation like that, how to deal with the a crazy emergency situation and the fear and the self-doubt, or do you just do it naturally?
There's got to be some natural aptitude. There's something about me that when I'm faced with a difficult situation, I have an urge to master it and get better at it. Mm-hmm. And as well as that, I don't have a high regard for rules, and I'm a bit of a risk taker. And I think those kind of elements of personality, there's something that I see across a lot of the colleagues that I work with that thrive in emergency, because in emergency you do have to be prepared to make a decision without a lot of information, and sometimes where there is no rules. And my mentor, Professor Steve Haskins, used to always say, when death is the alternative, there are no rules. Yeah. And that was, and he's one of the founding fathers of this discipline. And what he said is completely true. So there's definitely some natural aptitude. But what I discovered in about fourth year of university, again, my mum, I feel a little bit odd to be talking about my mum all the time, but they're very wise mothers. And she had been telling me, since I was a little kid, you get out of things what you put into them. And I didn't really realize that until about fourth year university, when I realized that I wanted to become a vet, and I needed to put in a hell of a lot of effort to do that. And since that time, what I've done is every time I'm faced with a challenge, is I try and hit it with 100% effort. Yep. And I think that throwing yourself into the challenge is what gives you the fulfillment when you're on that journey through the time, knowing that you're trying hard and you're not holding anything back. And that's the way I try to deal with emergencies and shifts and careers in emergency.
Okay. Just saying, like throwing yourself into the challenge, is there a particular way that you view a challenge or an obstacle instead of sort of, I don't know, being overwhelmed by them or something like that?
If you asked me a year ago, I couldn't have put this into words. But I've always felt intense satisfaction in being able to do really hard stuff. And what I realized after doing a little bit of reading about Stoicism, and specifically a very simple book to read, but very profound, was The Obstacle is the Way with Ryan Holiday this year. But the way of looking at those actual obstacles as the things that make you, the things that, if you're building your career, the things that are hardest to deal with are the things that, that actually build the foundations of that career. And I wouldn't have been able to put that into words a year ago, but it always struck me that the things that were the hardest for me to do were the things that I got best at. And some of those things have been surgery, mechanical ventilation in the veterinary field. But as simple as I did a year full time in the army, and I was hopeless at the start at climbing ropes. Couldn't climb ropes at all. Knew that I had to climb ropes to do it. So I went out the back of the accommodation block every afternoon, put my pack on, so I was carrying an extra 10 kilos, and practiced climbing ropes. And at the end of the time in that training platoon, I was the best in the platoon at climbing ropes. And I guess that's what I mean by throwing yourself into those challenges wholeheartedly, but also, at some level recognizing that the very things that seem impossible are the things that you remember, the things that make a difference, and the things that are, I guess, foundations to who you are in the long run. You just keep trying.
What do you think would be, I don't know, the first point, the most important thing that you do when it comes to actually tackling a large, big project? Because as a visionary of the company, you're tasked with sort of looking to the future and trying to direct and guide the direction of Animal Emergency Service or Animal Emergency Australia. How do you have this grand idea, but then what advice would you offer listeners on how to tackle large projects or large challenges or seemingly impossible things?
The first rule comes flippantly into my brain. It's from one of those emergency medicine 101 checklists. It's like, take your own pulse. Don't panic when you're faced with something that looks overwhelming, because it's not. And then remember that if you accomplish 1% of something every day, which seems like a very small amount, it's only going to take you 100 days to do it. So take your own pulse and break things down to very small steps. Claire Sharp, associate professor at, she probably is full professor now at Murdoch Uni in emergency medicine, had this conversation with me. She's an extremely high achiever, and we talked about really big goals. And she said, it was really true. Think about that big goal, but when it comes down to what you do every day, just think about the small things that you're doing that will help you achieve that goal. She's a teacher and a mentor and a lecturer, and so every day she's thinking about conducting herself in the way that best fits those attributes. When she's having a conversation with a veterinary student, she's going to be trying to put the most she can into teaching that individual person. And it is those tiny little elements that build the bigger picture, repeated over hundreds and hundreds of days.
So you think it's something like, and I've read this numerous times before, it's like you focus on the process, but not the outcome. The outcome's there, what the outcome is, but if you focus on the process and focus on taking small little steps, obviously the steps in the process, and focusing on those one at a time, then you don't feel overwhelmed. You don't get daunted by the project, which may be, climbing 1,000 steps or building a building or something like that, or starting an emergency hospital or something.
Or climbing a rope in the army.
Yeah. Well,
you've been the best at climbing the rope in the army in the end.
Climbing the rope in the army is quite easy because you can actually see the top of the rope, right? And you can define when you're up there. You can touch the bar and then you get down, right? That's pretty easy. But the problem with life in general and veterinary science is you can't see the top of that bar, so you don't actually know. You set these ideas for yourself and these dreams, but in working towards them, they often change, and they're often similar to what you thought about at the start, but sometimes they're totally unrecognizable. And I think that's you don't live that achievement. And the rope is bad because it's really uncomfortable climbing the rope, right? But you spend a fair bit of time climbing the rope and one split second touching the bar.
Yeah.
And then what do? You climb the damn rope again. And so in veterinary medicine, especially, like that, achieving fellowship took me about 5 years of the training program, 2 years of study, and there was intense fulfillment when I opened the letter that said I'd passed.
Yeah.
Lasted for about 2 to 3 hours. That I still remember, right? You still, when you want to feel incredible, I take myself back to that morning, opening the envelope with Julia, the woman who I'm fortunate enough to marry, we opened it together and it said I passed, right? And I still get butterflies in the tummy thinking about that. But the absolute fulfillment of that process was those years of study, the work put into publishing papers, and the incredible feeling of walking into the exam and trying to write constantly for 4 hours to get enough marks to pass. It's absolutely the process rather than the outcome that makes or breaks things.
I read a book by Ray Dalio, Ray Dalio's Principles, recently, and there's a thing that he says repeatedly in that book. Now, Ray Dalio is a very, very successful investor, one of the wealthiest men in the world, and he says reaching your goals gives you very little satisfaction. He says achieving success gives you nothing. It's about struggling well. To quote him, he says struggling well is the secret to happiness in life. He says life is going to be a struggle, accept it and do it well, and then that's the secret there. And it sounds pretty much exactly like what you're saying. So when you climb that rope, you may as well try and enjoy getting to the top, because getting to the top is going to be disappointing.
Yeah. Well, isn't it that you think about it, when you climb the rope, and then what do? You try and climb a longer rope.
Yeah.
That's,
exactly.
And what we don't realize, until you sit down and reflect upon it, is actually the bloody climbing of the rope was the fulfillment.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to go back to the start of your career again, talking about struggles and things that were difficult. Were there things at the start of your career that challenged you more than you anticipated? Things that surprised you how hard they were?
Yeah, there were. I remember I won't go through the whole of my first day as a veterinarian, because it was a long day. It was about 16 hours long. But I remember I drove out of the practice on an absolute high, drove a couple of 100 meters down the road and had to stop the car and vomit out of the door because of the delayed cortisone and adrenaline rush that I've been putting off all day. And that really defined the first few years of my career, is that there'd be intense highs, but then you started to realize, that where I started to realize where I'd made errors when I had time to reflect, and that would make me sick. And the biggest challenge for me as a vet is dealing with the uncertainty. And I wish I could say that goes away in time, but I think you just get better at dealing with it. The low point was one night. It was about 1 a.m. in the morning. There was only one nurse and me in the practice, and I had an undiagnosed patient out in the emergency room, and I sat down in the staff room with the 5-minute vet consult. And in those days it was a textbook. I'm sure no one reads a textbook anymore, but it's got a condition on every page, and it's about that thick. And I started at A, and I started leafing through this book, and I thought, this dog could have any condition in this book. How the hell am I ever going to make a diagnosis? And that you kind of think in those early years that as you learn more and as you put into place different strategies to diagnose, that you'll get rid of that uncertainty, and you'll feel like you know what you're doing. But that hasn't been my experience. What I've found is that the problems just get more and more difficult. The diagnosing the intestinal foreign body might become a little bit easier, but there's another problem that you have to deal with. And so in veterinary medicine, you're always working with uncertainty, and you're always working with self-doubt. And being able to recognize that and deal with that has been key to me feeling like key to me enjoying working in the field, because I can now try and understand when I've made clinical errors, but also understand that that's an absolutely human trait, and we're always going to have failures in treatment, failures in diagnosis, failures in client communication. There's absolutely no way around that. And you got to live with them, learn from them, but not let them knock you down. because otherwise it's going to be a horrible a horrible situation you're working in. If you set yourself up for perfection, maybe, Hubert, it's an impossible task, and recognizing that doubt and uncertainty and being able to work with it is probably was a major turning point for me.
Yeah, I think that's very valuable. I had a lecturer at uni who, when we touched on this point, and I think one of the students asked him how do you deal with that, and he said, look, if you've done your best, you've really tried your hardest, you can go to bed at night and fall asleep without feeling guilty about willfully doing something wrong. He said, then you're doing well. And I often have to tell myself that as well, to go, look, you tried your best, just let it go.
Yeah. That's a great friend of mine, Caitlin Logan, heard it from her professor in a very similar way. Actually, no, it was her first boss. She had an intestinal anastomosis breakdown, and she was crying about it. And he said, it's called a complication. What makes you so special that you're not going to get complications?
Yeah.
This is part and parcel of doing the work.
Yep.
And she said that made a big difference for her. She realized, complications occur through error, but error is inevitable.
You were talking before, and I suppose this, just reflecting upon what you were saying there about perfection and complications and things, but what about the thought, or I suppose for me, I like to strive for perfection because it feels like as if I've given as much as I can to a particular task or something like that. Having said that, I know that I probably get about 80 or 90% of what I actually wanted to get done, because I know that the other 10% will take me 3 times longer than what the 80% did or took. And then the actual impact of that extra 10% may actually not have any impact at all, apart from making me feel like as if I perfected something. But the idea of perfection, but then being okay with it, not being perfect somewhat, but ultimately being okay that you can fail, and being okay with failure is probably a bit more powerful, I suppose, to as to not aiming for perfection and being scared to fail.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm across a little bit the way I put that, because my intent is to do the very best that I can. But you as you say, you've got to understand when you don't make it, that is not, don't let that 10% define you.
Going back to what you were saying before, Rob, about struggling well and you can't see the future. And I totally agree there. We were talking about as a veterinarian or as a veterinary student, I had my career all planned out, and actually was working in a practice which had smallies and cattle and no horses. And that was the practice that I wanted to work at. And I envisioned myself kind of driving around, rolling green hills, doing dairy calls and cattle calls, and then coming back and doing smallies. And that was my vision of my career.
So you wanted to be James Herriot, basically.
I didn't read any of his books. This guy, so all the way through uni, people are like, you should read his books. And I was just like, who is this guy? And I read them when I finished, when I was doing emergency. And I was like, oh, okay, I can see why I should have read that book.
Sorry to interrupt.
But then I found myself in small animal practice, and then I found myself after that in emergency, and then my career in emergency. And thanks to you and giving me the space to room and grow, as taking me down different pathways. But I totally agree there that it will change, and it totally does change. What do you think, I suppose, would be the key ingredient there, knowing now, or I suppose having heard that advice from numerous people that you as veterinary students, your future is not certain and it will change? Like, what advice do you feel that you actually could provide a student with that in mind now?
Geez, that's difficult, Gerardo. Because I realize I getting in here, you got such a chance of 2 things. One, of preaching to people, and the other one of hypocrisy, right? Because I've made so many stuff ups, and I'm sitting here this morning feeling, looking back on the 17 years and thinking, geez, that so far so good. Whereas the other night on New Year's Eve, I think I made an error of diagnosis on a patient and felt down in the dumps and like, what do I do? And so the advice, I guess the advice is fraught with difficulty, but that is just don't give up, and I think that sounds really simplistic, but there's not there's so many things that you can do in life, but as Hubert said before, they're all going to be struggles. Right? So it's a complete myth that there's some easy way out there, and the more you put into something, the more you'll get out of it. And that's been my experience of veterinary medicine, is you keep trying, you develop an area of expertise, and don't give up on the really difficult days.
Yeah. The
what do you think? Oh, can I? Because Gerardo's thinking there. Sorry.
yeah.
It's painful for him because he's an emergency vet. But
I've come to the feeling that because I get asked all the time, what do you do next? Where are you going to be? What's your plans for 5 years and 10 years? And the people that I coach, and it's about setting goals and having sort of clarity around moving forward. And I feel that clarity is really important. But then at the same time, I feel that you have to be malleable. You have to be open to change, open to your pathway changing and changing according to sort of how you feel and what opportunities and doors open from as you learn, as you grow, you develop skills, doors open that you never thought could open. So ultimately, my perspective at this stage is that having values or ways that you want to be yourself in everyday life, whatever that is, right? And then working towards a couple key goals, which don't always have to be professional. They could be financially based. You want to provide support for your family, you want to travel the world or something. And then being open to where this career, because it can change a lot, being open to where it leads and not being sort of so rigid as to the picture of what you thought it would be, because it just changes all the time. And you yourself, as you grow and as you learn and you become more confident with things, will take on different challenges. I feel that as to provide the advice, any advice I provide to vet students is really just to have something to start with. Just focus on, if you like smallies, then just focus on getting into smallies, and then have your particular focus on just being the best person you can be for that. And if it changes, it changes. If you find you don't like smallies, you want to do largies, then go do largies. So I've kind of let go of the whole planning more than maybe 2 years in advance now. I know what I want in life, but I totally feel that the pathway can change whichever way it can and will change. And once I've accepted that, I actually feel a lot more comfortable stepping into that unknown and uncertainty, because that's where new doors will be found and doors will be opened. So I don't know, that's my kind of thought at the moment of it.
Absolutely. I think that the reason we want to discuss it is that feeling that we did a bit of research, Rob, to prepare for this podcast, to find out what people are worried about, what young vets and vet students are concerned about, and there's a very much concern, and I can remember the same. So you get that degree, you get to the top of the first rope, and then now what? And they look at their role models, and they look at people such as yourself or Gerardo, and you feel, well, how the hell am I ever going to get there? Because that's so far away. And I think so what we're trying to get to is, do you choose that path? Is that a preset goal? Did Rob Webster, the student, have any of this in mind when he started working, or was it just how do you how do you set that pathway? How do you start on that journey?
Jeez. And you know, now, like I again, I want to avoid hypocrisy or also giving advice to a vet student now, which is the advice that I'd give to myself,
Mm-hmm.
because you know we have, you know, Gerardo's talked about the path changing. I've talked about the behavioural aspects that Claire Sharp brought up with me, is that, you know, be that person that is the expert lecturer, be that person that's the CEO of the very successful business, and the answers present themselves. But, you know, when I graduated in 2001, I sat down on the 2nd of May. Sorry, I go back to that first year. I graduated from university with a strong motivation to make some money, because my parents had fought about. It was the only things my parents fought about when I was growing up was a lack of money, because we had none. And so I had this idea. It never even manifested itself while I was a vet student. I just did the best I could from 4th year on. From 1st to 3rd year, complete drunken blur. I can't remember it. But 4th and 5th year, I worked hard as a vet student. But I graduated and felt that, righto, now my responsibility was to make some money. And it took me 2 months to realize that you don't make money earning a salary and spending it all. And I read a lot of books after that. The Rich Dad, Poor Dad series, and 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I think, were the 2 major groups that I read at that time. And I then sat down after 6 months after graduation and wrote a set of goals. And I wrote down 5-year goals, 10-year goals, and 20-year goals. And although we're talking now about don't set your pathway completely, just about every one of the goals that I set on that day back in June 2001 came true, you know. And the 5-year goals were simple ones. I said I would like to get my membership in this field. I already knew I loved the field. 10-year goals were more nefarious, but I knew that if I was going to accumulate any finances at that stage, I'd need to own a business, so I'd need to buy property. And so I wrote down that I wanted to own property and own a business and have, I think I wrote down $2 million of capital, because I back calculated that amount would enable me to retire. And then I had no idea, but I thought maybe at some stage I'd want kids. So I wrote down that in 15 years, I'd like to be living with Jules where I choose with children. And, you know, and I at that stage, I thought if I couldn't become a specialist vet, I might become a human medicine doctor. And so I said either a specialist vet or a doctor. And I wrote those goals down, put them in the filing cabinet. And it was only a couple of years ago that I pulled them out. And the ones that had gelled with me, the ones that had that were important in my future had all happened. And I think it was, you know, the power of psychology they talk about. You know, I didn't have to look at them again to know they were there. But you know, even though we're not talking about setting things in place for the long term, the power of writing down what I wanted back in 2001 really tailored it, I guess. There was always something that I was working towards. And now, you know, what I want though, you know, that's changed completely. Like when I wrote those goals, I thought best thing would be to retire when you're 40. Now I realize that you retire when you're 40, you've got nothing left. You know, what are you going to do? You know, 6 months might be great to go traveling. 12 months might be great to go traveling. 5 years might be great to go traveling. But the actual thing that gives you fulfillment and makes you feel like you are doing something worthwhile, that's that awful thing called work that you show up to every day, you know. And so now I'm like, I got no intention of ever really retiring, just changing the pursuit of what's, you know, what brings me fulfillment over time. So yeah, long rambling talk, but don't be afraid to set some goals.
You need to move towards something. I think what Gerardo said as well. You've got to pick a goal. You need to move forward. So pick something to move towards, and then, but keep your mind open as to which direction that journey takes. I I think would be maybe a nice way of summarizing it, Gerardo. Do you agree?
Yeah, no, it's really good. I just I feel that people, especially students, because I get asked this all the time, they kind of want to know what they should do, and that varies. You can't really answer that because they have different interests, they have different strengths, they have different areas which gel with them more than other areas, and essentially like they should have goals. Exactly what Rob's saying is these kind of life goals, but then what I feel is that their career, especially veterinary science, can just go different ways, whichever way they really want it to go. That if they get too fixed on a particular pathway, it can actually be quite constraining, or they might, unless the particular pathway is the key to their actual long-term goal. But I feel they just got to pick something, especially when they're heading out, when you're about to graduate. Just pick a job, don't just pick any job. We've got a set of criteria to look for there, but just have somewhere to go and just start. Start, and then being open to where it goes. And just as long as that pathway, whichever pathway you take, leads you towards the goals that you have, the larger goals in life, then that's the simplest and easiest advice would be just to start somewhere.
Yep, absolutely.
Hubert, I was going to ask Rob some questions about fellowship study and stuff like that. Did you have anything in mind for that?
No, you go ahead, please, mate.
For those that are interested in or considering doing specialty, what made or what helped you in terms of your decision-making process towards taking the plunge and actually deciding, bam, I'm going to do this. I'm going to dedicate 5 years, 7 years to heading down this pathway. Was there anything that kind of helped you out there, or was it still start the process and roll with it? What was your thoughts there?
It was for me. It was really just the next step at becoming more expert in the field that I chose. I loved emergency medicine, and I wanted to do it better and better. That was and after membership, the opportunity to do a training program came up. It was quite a difficult training program, and I'll be forever grateful to Dr. Terry King for setting it up with Professor Steve Haskins, where Steve came over and taught us for 3 to 4 months at a time. But really, there was two sides to the decision. One was just the pure opportunity to get better at something that I love doing. But the other was the business decision, because I started my fellowship after we'd bought the first practice, the animal emergency service, between Simon and myself. And I knew that in the long term, if we were truly going to create the future of emergency medicine and critical care, we had to have a specialist. And I thought, well, I better go and learn this and become a specialist. So they were the two sides to the decision, one being a business decision and one being just a kind of a thirst for knowledge.
And how did you have any particular things that helped you with regards to when you were studying? You would have spent years and years of study, so you would have spent years and years of time studying. Surely you would have kind of fine-tuned that process and figured out, I suppose, some of the more powerful tools or tips that helped you with.
Yeah, so my one study tip, which I say ad nauseum, came from my experience as a vet student, where I didn't know a great deal as a vet student, and so a lot of the reason I asked my exams came down to exam technique. And so what I do is in SWAT-BAC, I just do all of the past exams. And it was only during fellowship that I realised what a powerful technique that was, because answering questions practices getting you in the mindset for sitting an exam. Summaring notes doesn't get you into the mindset for sitting an exam. Reading papers doesn't get you in the mindset for sitting an exam. None of those things practice the display of knowledge and thought. And doing that is the most powerful thing I've ever found. So what I would do, say I had to summarize a paper, I'd read the paper, and then I would imagine the sort of exam questions that would come out of that paper. It didn't matter if they were, totally irrelevant, would never be used in the exam. But then I'd sit down and I'd write answers to those questions that I'd formulated in my head. And so during the training process, I did a lot of training. I did a lot of question and answer with Steve Haskins and the training group. But I sat down for 5 months of SWAT vac before the exams and read and answered questions for those 5 months. And that's what got me through, was that when I sat down with the exam papers, they were 4-hour exam papers. I had calluses all over my fingers from writing so much, because I'd been doing nothing but practicing writing exams for 4 months, and set me in good stead.
Wow, that's cool.
Rob, I had a question on the list here that I think will maybe tie in with this. The question is, what have you spent time and money on during your career that's been the most worthwhile? Was it that? It sounds like it was the specializing, or was there something else that you would put ahead of that?
No, the best time of my career is the time when I decided to get off the couch and do physical training. So there's, if I really had to, and sometimes I'd be late for the tutorials when we were doing the study, and I would, in my mind, I'd think, well, if I didn't find the gym, I was going to kill myself. I used to be, sorry, not literally, but I was going to die from heart attack or obesity. I didn't used to pay attention to diet, and I didn't see the need for physical exercise, and now I do it every single day, and I'm sure that investment's given me more than anything else that I've done in my career.
Brilliant. What exercise do you do? What's your poison of choice?
It's weight training, because weight training is something that can be done really quickly, and it's still the exact challenge. And I do it in the mornings now, and I love it gives me a hell of a lot of confidence going into the day, knowing that I've already challenged myself with something that's almost impossible for me. That's the thing about weights. There's no point lifting weights that you can lift. You've always got to lift a weight that you can't lift, and you always find that you can do it. So you can go into every day with a little bit more confidence. But the actual type of training has changed a lot. I sometimes in the past I've done running. Gerardo and myself and a colleague, Dr. Alex Hines, did the Kokoda Challenge, a 100K run 2 years ago, and that took a hell of a lot of preparation. But it was all the same thing. It's helping your body perform more, and there are definite links between physical performance and mental and psychological fitness. And I every year I see more of that rather than less of that.
We often forget about those things that we do outside, which impact us greatly in our careers. We always think about sort of the things that we can do with regards to learning and study and so forth, but it's part of the whole body well-being, or just that, it's mind and body. What is your thoughts around having because Alex talks about this as well, and she likes the idea of having one overwhelming physical challenge per year to sort of keep, have a goal for yourself, or something that's going to make you strive to push harder, or something like that. If for me, I would just train multiple times a day, multiple times a week. But then when I heard this concept especially when we ran the Kokoda Challenge, that was just an incredibly painful feat. But then it really highlighted to me that actually having the idea of this one challenge per year, what could actually be the motivation or the inspiration to keep training. What do you think there?
I like it, but I think it'll vary the challenge that you choose. It's important always to have a challenge. So at the moment I'm training with weights, and just two of the challenges that I'm working on. One is to get up to doing 20 loaded dips, and another one is doing 100 burpees in a row in less than 8 minutes. They're like they're smaller challenges than the Kokoda, right? But in your mind, you're always challenging yourself, and I think that continually trying to do better than you did yesterday is really important.
Yeah.
And I think a big goal like Kokoda can focus you. But to be completely honest, I'm scared of doing that goal every year. That was huge. And I think when it comes around, it's really valuable.
100, like, okay, 100 burpees in a row in 8 minutes. That's a challenge that will take months and months to get to that point. So it sounds like it's only 8 minutes of pain, but that's 8 months of training and whatever and stuff to get to that point. So depending on what you're starting.
I'm not so sure about the logic in this. I enjoy exercise, but I don't. We talk about suffering well, but I don't think you need to suffer excessively.
Well, Rob's really good at suffering, especially he takes suffering really well.
That's the description of my training. Really, is suffering well. It's I love it.
Oh yeah, that's interesting. Gerardo, have you got more questions at the moment?
No. I thought. Do you think there's any other areas that we should explore with regards to Rob's fellowship training? So we talked about, how he studied. We talked about kind of his decision-making process in terms of electing to do that. It was based on wanting to become an expert, and also was one of the stepping stones with regards to progressing in his long-term goals. We also talked about sort of how exercise and things was really important for him. What else? What other areas do you reckon we can explore with regards?
I suppose this is purely from a personal curiosity thing, but I think I've touched on it with Rob before. So the decision to specialize, it's something that I've considered in the past, but you had very defined reasons to do it. I suppose my question is it worth it? Is it worthwhile, or is it always worthwhile? Because my reasoning, I'll often get stuck in a thought loop with it to go, it would be great to know more, and it's, as you say, to be at the pinnacle of your field would be a lovely thing. But then again, I look at the impact that it will have on your personal life, and the time sacrificed, the time that you could spend on every day moving forward. And I have up to now, I've been able to justify it, to go, I'm not sure if the investment of time is going to pay off, and I don't mean just financially. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
I definitely agree with you, Hubert. It's not a necessary stepping stone in everyone's career, and sometimes I'm sure it doesn't work out for people the way they envisage at the start. For me, it was really above all the business decision. We started that business, and we were, we Simon and I said, what's our vision? We're going to create the future of emergency medicine, critical care, and you just can't do that without having expertise in the field. And so it was absolutely aligned with our goals. But what I have seen from other colleagues that have done fellowship training is, and the things that I can tell you that it's not, one, it's not the ticket to a free financial future. There are much better ways to improve your remuneration as a veterinarian, rather than doing a fellowship training program. And that would be my first point, is that if you go into fellowship training expecting that it is going to be the last difficult thing that you do, it's a complete misconception. Once you finish as a specialist, exactly the same pressures will apply to you that apply to you before you do the specialty. You'll still have pressure for your time. You'll still have pressure on veterinary productivity. And if anything, the demands from your employer are going to increase. And so if your primary interest or a motivation is remuneration and say financial freedom, go and read about business, go and read about investment, and educate yourself along those lines. You know, you need to, in a very simple statement, you need to, if financial reward is what you're after, you need to increase the level of service that you offer. And one of those things might be becoming a specialist. But if you imagine, you know, if you become a specialist, you can only service so many clients. If you own a 3-vet general practice, you can offer a hell of a lot more service to clients than you can as a single specialist. So, you know, it's not the greatest pathway to financial reward. And the other thing is, it's not, if you're a vet that does overnight shifts and you, say in my own field, emergency medicine, and you go away to do a emergency medicine and critical care residency thinking that you'll get to work during the day and it'll be much easier. That's just not the case. You know, work is going to get harder, not easier. So those are the things that fellowship is not.
Yeah.
I would have, it's not going to make anything easier, and it's not going to be the best way forward financially either.
As you said before at the start of the podcast, that the challenges that you face are kind of matching the challenges that, they kind of match the skills and the knowledge that you have. So I agree there that sometimes knowing more stuff, more knowledge is useful and powerful and helps you feel confident and comfortable. But then you are tasked with dealing with the management of that. You know, you use the example of an intestinal perforation, like a foreign body surgery. A veterinarian can do that foreign body surgery, and then it breaks down. Then you're tasked with the management of a septic patient, and then you're tasked with the management of a septic patient that's in refractory hypotension, that is, you know, in the process of slowly checking out. So the challenges that you'll be tasked with the knowledge that you have will be greater as well, I suppose, too. And I suppose that's the reason why you do it, and suppose the outcome of learning more and being more capable is that you are tasked with more challenging and difficult situations.
Yeah, you're right. Especially as a young vet, I always imagine that the more you study, the easier it will get, because you'll know everything, and then but then the longer you're in the game, the more you realize that that's never going to happen. There's no such thing as knowing everything and being capable in every situation. Yeah. All right. Should we start with a few of the shorter questions?
You only got one here, mate.
Yeah, well, you've talked about books, Rob. You've mentioned The Obstacle is the Way. It's a great book. Have you got any other winners? Anything else that I need to read?
I was thinking about the books. I just love reading, and I do it everything from just relaxing, which is the simple page turners, to really looking at lessons for life. And really, I've read a lot of self-improvement over the years, and I go back to Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, I think it is. Is that embodied for me? 7 ways to think about what you're doing that makes it much more, helps you line up what you're doing with those goals that you set for yourself. And I found that book very profound, and I still remember the 7 habits off by heart. Don't always apply them, but definitely remember them. And when we're talking about finances, Yeah. That other series that I read right at the start was Napoleon Hill Think and Grow Rich, which I didn't really understand, and the Rich Dad Poor Dad series.
Yep.
But I think I want to stress to anyone that's still listening now, I read those books in about 2001, and we bought a vet practice in 2005. So, you apply, you read things, and they give you a bit of a pathway, but you're not going to go and set it all in motion and make it happen right then. Things take a lot of time, and all you can do is make those incremental improvements each day to get you to that goal. So don't expect things to happen overnight, because nothing does.
Yeah, absolutely. Alrighty. Favorite quotes? I didn't put that on your list there. You've mentioned one or two already. I like I've heard your one before about when death is the alternative, there are no rules. Have you got any other ones that help you through the day?
Yeah, I don't know if they help me, but I write them all down.
Yeah.
And Gerardo, I've got to give credit to one quote that I remember a lot. That I'm sure it's come from other people, but my colleague John Sarash, who John Sarash, I work with in emergencies at the moment. He's doing a residency in surgery, but I was talking to him at some stage when a mutual friend was doing one of these 12-week body challenges. Yeah. And I'm like, what do you think of these 12-week challenges, John? He's a man of few words, and he's like, got to live the challenge.
You've got to live the challenge.
Got to live the challenge. And so what I do is I write down anyone's quotes that I think is really worthwhile. And John Sarash, live the challenge, is it was really quite profound. But who else? I'll give you one other one that's in here. Give me 1 second.
Do you keep them stored on your phone or your computer, or where?
Yeah, just on the phone.
Yeah,
in one spot, so I can write them down.
Yeah.
Where are we? Oh, yeah, I'll go back to the one, Gerardo, we were talking about this the other day. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the great American philosopher and essayist, that says, and probably a good way to finish, sow a thought, reap an action, sow an action, reap a habit, sow a habit, reap a character, sow a character, and reap a destiny. Ralph Waldo Emerson. The small things we focus on become our lives, and I think that's very profound, and not a bad way to finish off in a discussion about careers and veterinary science.
Can you read that again, please?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No worries. So sow a thought and reap an action. Sow an action, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, and reap a destiny. Yeah,
that is profound.
Yeah, it's and it was written, I think, in about 1880, 1870. So a long time ago. But I guess the truths that we live by were all uncovered a long time ago. It's just, it takes you your whole lifetime to figure them out. And by the time you figured it all out, the travesty of our existence is, who listens to old people? Those, it's so horrible. Those old people, by the time you're 80, you've got it all figured out. No one listens to you anymore. Yes, it's like that's it. But anyway, that's and I read Ralph Waldo Emerson. He wrote an essay called Self-Reliance that Barack Obama says is one of the most profound things he's read. And after reading the essay, it's pretty hard going. It's been rewritten in so many forms by so many other authors in the field of kind of self-help or self-improvement in the 20th century. But it's probably the first time some of these thoughts were put onto paper, and it's really quite an interesting read if you can persist with it.
All right, absolutely. I think you're right. I think that is a great spot to wrap up, Gerardo.
Yeah, that was awesome. Good job.
I think
Thanks, Rob.
I think that's it. That was really
Okay.
good. I'm gonna
Thanks, guys.
I've learned a lot from that. Thank you so much for your time, Rob. Right, always a pleasure to hang out with you.
You too, Hugh.
Cheers.
Have a lovely day.
See you later, guys. Talk
Bye.
soon.
Okay, if you're still listening, it means you're really committed to improving. So here are some of the things that we've taken from our chat with Rob.
Think about a few major life goals for your career or your personal stuff. We're thinking or talking big picture stuff. Write them down somewhere we won't lose them. Now, take a first step. One step in any direction, but a direction forward. Do a bit of research, send a few emails, make a phone call or two, book a course, buy a book, listen to a podcast, whatever it is, just take action, take that first step forward.
If you don't have a regular routine for some sort of physical activity already, grab your diary or your phone, then go to wherever you set your reminders or have your to-do list and block off some time now to do something physical. Decide now what it is that you want to do and write it down. Something like go for a walk or cycle to the shops. Now, do the same for every day for the next 2 weeks. If you don't schedule time for it, chances are you won't do it.
Is it something that you'd like to do or are trying to do, but you're feeling like you're failing at it? Think about the effort you're putting into it. Are you really giving it 100% of your available effort? Is there something more that you could do? What could you do today that can move you closer to your goal? Once you've done all this, go phone your mum.
So that's it. It might sound like you don't have much to do this time, but step one might not be quite as easy as it sounds. So get busy and go smash it.
Before you start, head to the iTunes store and give us some feedback. We'd love to know how we're doing, and if you loved it, go tell at least 3 of your friends to give us a go.